So what I want to do, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting before some of you guys had joined, was sort of as our backup plan, because Dr. Rember wasn't able to connect with us to be, well, a week or two or three ago when we tried to hook back up with him to be able to get him to come into our meeting. So as an alternative, I came up with an idea with the help of Robert on what do you do if you come across a collection or someone brings a fossil to you when you're working at the NARG table at one of the rock shows, and they say, "What is this?" And you say, "Well, it's a snail shell or it's a clam shell," and it's kind of an open-ended question most of the time, because you can say, "Well, that's a fossil snail or it's a fossil clam," but are there any clues that you can get from the specimen that will actually help you identify which formation? Like, what are the questions you want to ask, and what are the clues that you want to look at to see if you can tell maybe where this came from? A lot of people that I cross paths with, they're not aware of where the fossils came from. They just have their grandpa's collection and he passed away, and so they have me take a look at stuff and I can say, okay, yeah, well, that's probably a story formation, or that's definitely a story formation. Which formations are commonly collected in Oregon by people, and which ones are you most likely to come across that have clues? So sorry for the glare there, but I was going to try to do this in a better color. I wanted to highlight the ones in this chart. This book is Bill Orr's older Oregon fossils book. I have a few copies, so I should just highlight the book itself. But I want to talk a little bit about the Empire Formation and going back in time. The Empire, yeah, that works, cool. That one people often collect, that's down in the Coos Bay area, Fossil Point area. The club's collected there before. It's around 6 million years, 5.3 to somewhere around 7-8 million years, maybe out to 12. I think 12 is where some of that's also, if I'm not mistaken, where Wally, our whale, came from, the Empire Formation. Astoria is here, and the Nye mudstone is, so Astoria is primarily from just south of Newport, maybe Lost Creek, no real further than Ona Beach. Nye kind of intermingles, it mingles with that inner whatever, it interlocks with it. You make up your own word. And that's south of there to around Seal Rock, but it also kind of comes up north with the float, the pieces, and I'll tell you how I think you can tell the difference between them. Well, obviously a point of formation, because Kent just shared that with us. The Scotts Mills is not heavily collected, but I have some stuff to talk about there. Pittsburgh Bluff occasionally, Kesey Formation for sure, Cowlitz a little bit, Nestucca I didn't bring any, but that one's kind of tricky, and I can tell you about that. And then Spencer, not so much. Colito, that's back down at south in the Coos Bay area as well. Yamhill Formation, there's some things there that you might come across. And I'm trying to prove something from the Tyee, but I haven't. And then Looking Glass is kind of interesting for some of the crab people, the pea crab folks. You know who you are. That's way down south, not Grants Pass side, but from the coast, Curry County. So Gold Beach area and heading
Agnes, right?
Agnes, yeah, that's the nearest town. I couldn't remember. Thank you, Mackenzie. So those are kind of the general things that you might see. The ones I dotted are much less common. The other ones, yeah, you can find stuff out there, but I don't cross paths with it much. It's not places that are easily collected. I forgot one here, the Eugene Formation for clams and snails. The Fisher Formation is mostly leaves. The club's collected that too. But what's the difference between the ESC, or sorry, the Eugene Formation, the Spencer, the Kesey? They're all kind of about similar age, and they're all before that's Eocene, and then we have our Miocene times up here in the Aquinnah, Nye, and well, actually, Quinn is on the border, but Nye and Astoria for the Miocene. So all of our time frames here in Oregon in the valley, really, they start going backwards in time. They start right about, and I would say for the valley, really around 44, 45 million years up to about 5 million. So that's the window of time that the Willamette Valley has. And there's another picture in here that I'll show you real quick, that one of the drawings from his book that shows what the valley must have looked like. Here's one of the drawings. It does not include all of the formations, but it was like an inland sea, or like the Puget Sound is now. So Eugene and Salem and Portland, they're all kind of right along. Portland would be itself, Portland proper is going to be on the land in this drawing, but Salem and Eugene are actually in the water. So the Eugene Formation, the Yamhill Formation, and the Kesey up here, it's all in this inland stuff. So it's not out in the main part of the ocean, it's inland, but it is saltwater. So that's kind of the prediction of what it was like going back in the mid Eocene times. And it wasn't much different in the Oligocene either. So that sort of gives you some context for what we're doing. So with that being said, the fossils that you can find and or we'll see, I'll put the book aside as we watch for things. If you see this one, it's the easiest one to start with. This is Astoria Formation, good old Anadera divicta. You won't find this really in any of the other Willamette Valley formations. You can find it on the East Coast. It's way bigger than this. There's other formations, but this is going to tell you you are in the Astoria Formation. You won't find this in the other ones. I don't think there's an Anadera in Kesey. I've not seen it. It had quite a bit of a range in time and across the planet, but for some reason it was not prevalent in other Willamette Valley formations. So when you see this ridge, it's like a cockle, I guess. If you see these ridges, you know you're in the Astoria Formation, like 99%, unless the specimens came from another state or something. And just to give you an idea of the size, now you're going to test me to see. There it is. This is the smallest one I found. I thought I discovered a new species, and Ellen Moore said, no, that's Anadera. So there you go. That's a baby Anadera. So they can get pretty good size, but when you're looking at real close, some of the smaller stuff, there's your size range. So sometimes things that don't look common, I don't know if I can make it work here. There, you can still see those ribs. And she said, nope, that's a baby Anadera. And this is from Astoria. Both of these came from Moolock area. This is probably Beverly Beach. Okay.
Are you saying that those aren't in the Nye Mudstone also, or?
I do not think that Anadera is. I've never seen Anadera in the Nye. I've seen other ones. Now, if there's a ribbed one, if you've seen it, then it may be there. But if it's loose in the material, I think it's, sorry, it's not focused anymore. I think it's float, unless you find it. And here's, so while we're at that, and I guess I'll just kind of, as it comes to mind, here's how I tell the difference between the Nye and the Astoria. And I've had people argue this and other people not, and nobody can prove it one way or the other. The Astoria Formation tends to be this gray color. The Nye, I believe, tends to be this orange color. There's more iron in it. And you'll say, wait a minute, I see these in the Astoria Formation at Moolock. Well, that material can be float. The ocean can move these rocks north and south quite a bit. And the reason why I've decided that for myself, and I'm waiting for people to argue with me, is what I was asking Kent to do. If you look at these scallops, and this one here is just broken down the middle. This one's a pretty good size one. And you look at this edge right here. These ribs are all basically the same height going all the way across. That's patinopecten. It's very common in the Astoria. The vertipectin is extremely rare in the Astoria, but it's extremely common in the Nye. And this one's not the best example, but the seventh rib is higher. Whoops, there we go. It's higher than all the others. It's one that's high. All of them are the same. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, seventh one. It's higher. And then I was going through my drawers. And I thought, that's too bad. That one's not very good. That shows the rock more. This one, it's a little bit of the rock. It's this reddish color. You guys see how that seventh one is higher? It's right there. That's vertipectin fulcanus. And that's in the Nye. That's on a red rock. This is patinopectin. It's in the gray rock. There's a lot of crossover rocks or fossils in the two. And so far, I've never found a fulcanus, a vertipectin. I've never found one in the gray matrix in 20 years of looking. So that's the evidence that I have, and it's not proven, but that's what I'm going with. And if you guys have questions, please interrupt at any time. And I'm from what I'm seeing, I don't see chat. It's showing my screen, covering the whole screen here. So just interrupt if you do. Other things, and I'll kind of try to keep it relevant to what we've already seen. The largest clam you're going to find, if somebody's showing you one this big, and when we're talking about the Catherinella, so here's our Catherinella that Jerry was talking about. This is the biggest one you find in the Astoria Formation. So when you find this, it sort of looks like the gooey ducks of today. They're really large clams. That's Astoria. I found a bigger one recently. They do get pretty big. That's Astoria Formation. And I don't know that Panopia is found in the others necessarily. They are found all over the place, but this is Astoria in the gray material and that size. Should I have another one? No. All right. Here's the other thing I was talking about with Jerry, and you guys can see it really well. When you're looking at these clams, when they're by themselves, you may not necessarily know for sure that they're Astoria Formation, but if somebody says, yeah, I'm at the beach and I'm collecting these, do we know what they are? And if you look at these, they kind of look the same. The size is not as indicative. I'm looking to see if I have I have it. Here's the large Keone. Okay, so this is Keone encephera, and this one is Catherinella. They both look pretty similar. But when you look at it this way, one of them has this heart-shaped part here that's called a luneal, and that's in Ellen Moore's book. That one tells you for sure that you have Keone encephera, and the Catherinella doesn't have that. It's not as prominent. It doesn't look like the heart shape. When it's not eroded, it looks, well, it's not exactly a heart, but it's pretty close. You can see the shape here. So you can't go by the ribs on the sides because this is both the same species. And it's a bay clam. You find it in a bay situation. You can go up to Garibaldi and find whatever the current version of this today is. But those are luneals. So that's definitely Keone encephera. And this one here is definitely Catherinella. And there's only 2 species of clams this size, this shape. So you know it's one or the other. The only other one that's even remotely close to those is one called Spicula, yeah. Where is it? Here he is. He. And you can see it's much smaller. It's not as thick. So that one. And then there's another larger one that's like this, that's really flat, really thin. That's a Macoma. So those are really the 5 big clams you're going to see, not counting our big one. 6 total. Well, I guess that's 4 there, right? 4, yeah, 5. So those 4 and the big one, those are the big 5 you're going to find. There aren't any other kinds that you find over there. Everything else is much smaller. There's other clams, but they're certainly not this big.
You're saying all these are from the Astoria?
Every one of these, all of these are Astoria formation.
Have you found any of those from the airport, Lost Creek area south?
These show up there a lot. You'll find these. In fact, this one here is from Lost Creek. And I don't know if it's too far south of there. I've not found them south of Ona. I found them Moolock and I found them at Lost Creek. Lost Creek is a fantastic place to go. Moolock tends to be more worn. The ones at Lost Creek tend to be more complete, like that.
Well, let me tell you an observation I have of the bones from the two different areas.
Great.
Stuff down in the Lost Creek area, the bones are way darker. They're more of a black color almost. And stuff that I find in Moolock Beach area are the brown. I mean, it's obviously completely different. And I just don't know if you're saying that all that stuff is Astoria formation down there, why the different color of the bone?
So a first answer is that there's different time frames in the Astoria. Keep in mind it's from 13, 14 million, 15 million out to 19 million. So somewhere in that 4 million years, there may have been different minerals. Secondly, Lost Creek has a lot of overlap and there is Nye formation at the wall. I believe the dolphin that was dug out of that wall by our friend Dave Taylor, that's Nye at Lost Creek. But the float that's out in the waves is mostly Astoria, but that's where this came from. This one here came from Lost Creek. So the float down there, you almost can't tell the difference between the two. And I'm making a hypothesis that has not been proven that this darker material is more often the Nye material. And it's float that's mixed in with the Astoria material. So you may not know if those bones that you're finding are Nye or Astoria. They could be either one. But
Yeah, also notice some of those stuff like the first porpoise skull I found down there was more orangish color down in that direction. So
according to my hypothesis, that would be Nye. And I have yet to have somebody prove me wrong with evidence that's scientific. The person who came close with trying to convince me I was wrong was Guy de Torres. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. He didn't.
So this Dr. Neem I was talking to earlier this evening, he was telling me there's another formation. I think he called it the Depot Bay Formation. And it's like right around Whale Cove, or maybe it was, I can't remember, maybe call it Whale Cove Formation, but he said it was more of a granular formation and there was a few places, and he wants to take me on some field trips and drive around and show me this stuff. But he's published a ton of papers on different stuff and is very knowledgeable. And I guess he's getting ready to present something up at a geologist convention in Portland, I think in the next few days.
Definitely go. That we can only learn more and more. And
yeah, I'm not going to be able to go because I'm not going to walk that far right now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he's going to be in the scene for years to come, and maybe we can plan a field trip and have him describe some of the geology of what we're looking at when we're doing this. Here's an example of Astoria, this lighter gray material, and we're kind of looking at different clams. There's our Anadera right there. That tells you we're in Astoria. This is an olive snail. So this one's Ficus modesta, and it's pretty common. It's a pretty common big one, but there's often smaller ones too. So just to show you how you can have different ones, that's probably about the same, but there's a nice little guy. It's the same species. Whoops. And this one was found out in the waves more. It's preserved a little bit more. It has some color to it. It's smaller. It's the same species as this one. So I guess my point is, don't let the matrix necessarily convince you, but use it as a clue. This is Astoria. This could be anywhere, but the fact that I know I found it there, I've got to make sure I keep this with a label, because otherwise it's too easy to get that mixed up. This is common throughout all different kinds of layers in the strata. So when you find ones like this in a particular location, make sure you label them. Here's another small one. So this shape is pretty much always Ficus modesta. There's only one. It's nice when you have just one of a genus and it doesn't look anything like all the others. So that's something when you go to identify a species, it's helpful to start with the ones you know are really, really different. And then from there, what's unique to each formation. So anyway, I kind of like that one. It shows the matrix. And a lot of times, as a side note, I'll leave the fossil with the matrix. I know, Pamela, you were showing some of yours where you were trying to get them out of the matrix. Sometimes you want to just leave it in the matrix, especially if it's broken up, because you can see some of the detail that might disappear when you take it out, but you also see what it's associated with. This could be Kesey, it could be Astoria, it could be anything, but finding it with this, I know it's Astoria. So that's how that can be helpful. The other one you mentioned, and I'll throw this in here. This is one, this was actually given to me. That's the Aturia. This is extremely rare in the Astoria formation. I know, Kent, you found a couple of them, but I was asking Ellen Moore because it was in her book, and her license plate was Aturia. And so I asked her about it, and she said, well, this was her favorite one. And she said her estimates were that 1 out of 3,000 trips to the beach, you'll get an Aturia. And the really nice ones actually have some nacre to them. So it's basically related to a nautilus. It's one of the later ones. It's not related directly to an ammonite, but it's too recent to be an ammonite. They went extinct with the dinosaurs. But we do have nautilus living today in the ocean, and this is distantly related. It's in the same order as that. It's nautilus, maybe close to the same family. I think it's super family is the same one. So keep an eye out for these, but the tricky thing is to not get them confused with the good old Crepidula prerupta. Here is something that often people bring, oh, I've got an Aturia. And you can see there's similar patterns to this. Somebody actually thought this was the Crepidula. Oh, I got one of those. And I said, well, that's not the Crepidula or Crepidula, however you want to say it. You guys can see similar pattern here. This one's a different kind of creature. This one here is a slipper snail, and a single one looks like this. Okay, it's just like a single snail and crawled around. And the funny thing about these guys is that they stack on top of each other, and you'll find them in the fossil record stacked. So this is actually 4 specimens, 4 individuals all stacked on top. And the story goes, and I believe they're still around today, that the one on the bottom is the female, and the males are all stacked up on top. And they're waiting their turn in a way, because this female will go away, and the bottom one will change from a male to a female. And then when it's, we'll say, taken care of, it moves away, and the next one turns female. So they kind of live like that, and they change their sex depending on who's at the bottom of the pile. So, and then you can find that this one here I actually got from a garage sale. So these are pretty big, and they collected in the Astoria formation. It had Astoria formation labels. So sometimes it can be confusing because the sizes are very different, and sometimes the color is different. This just had exceptional preservation. And I believe this one came from Lost Creek. I don't know where this one came from. This one came from Mulak. So it's the same formation, the same critter, just different preservations. So that's one of the things you can make it kind of tricky. Yeah, this is Spencer Creek is where that came from. So that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's what goes under the bridge at Beverly Beach, right? Isn't that Spencer?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Beverly Beach, that's Moolock, that's Lost Creek. Lost Creek tends to hold their color more. That's another thing I've noticed, that if you have some color with your fossils and you know it's Astoria, that it's probably, you can say, well, hey, were you at Lost Creek? Hey, how'd you know that? Well, it's usually because the fossils keep their color more there. It's not to say you can't find color at Moolock, but Moolock tends to all be white. Okay, I gotta make sure these get back on where they're supposed to go. All right, other key things, the keys. So looking at our time frame, we've got the Astoria. The Kesey Formation is the other one that's pretty popular. And I will say that the most likely one you're gonna see from an older collection is this guy. And you don't see it in the Miss Bluff area. You don't see it near the lockers. This one here came from what is known as the railroad tracks, the trestle. The trestle has been marked off limits for collecting for many years, but going back 30, 40 years, it was a very popular place for people to go and collect fossils. You just go for the hike up there, and there's laying everywhere out there. And so you come across collections that have these in here. And I know that's from, because this is Nemocardium. It's a nice big size clam. There is nothing like this with these ridges on this side and smooth here. There's nothing like this in the Astoria Formation. And the matrix material is a lighter gray. If you compare that to the Astoria, it's a little bit darker. Some people think, oh, gray is gray. Well, there's a difference there. This is Kesey. This is Astoria. And so just knowing that when you see these patterns here, that's Kesey, you know pretty much that this was collected at the trestle. Now, there may be other places that you can find it, but I'm not aware of them, and nobody's collecting it these days. It doesn't show up. Every once in a while, these will show up in the concretions that are broken up when we're looking for crabs. They'll find these with the ribs. So sometimes they'll be in those, but this is, I can tell this was not in a concretion. This is matrix all stuck in here. So this is definitely from the railroad tracks, from the trestle. And they have big clams, the big gigantic lima. That's out of my storage unit. I didn't have it. And they have really nice snails. There's some really spectacular specimens that come from up there, and they're pretty well preserved. This is pretty strong preserved shell, as opposed to the Astoria, which tends to flake pretty easily if it's not wave worn and survived that. So that's one to watch out for. The other one that's pretty fun up there is, well, there's two of them I was going to show. This one. This is probably the best colorful fossil snail you can find in Oregon. If you see anybody with shells with nacre like this, you get the rainbow colors. They're typically pastel rainbow colors as opposed to primary colors like the amylite. This is from Rock Creek. This is, it's Kesey Formation, but it's a different part of the layer. It's not related. It's not the same part of the Kesey as the Miss Bluff or the railroad trestle. This has this really dark, shaly kind of rock. It fractures easily, but it has almost 80% of the snails you find are this critter, Bathybombix columbiana. And it's got some great spires to it. They're preserved extremely well. The outside layer of the shell is almost always gone. And this is the inside layer, the second layer of the shell that has all the colors. And that's the part we like to see. There's a little bit of the original shell there, but it's normally when you break it out, you can find these. And then the other thing you find with these are extremely large dentalium. And I placed it in, I brought it, but I put it somewhere and I can't find it anywhere. The dentalium is a tusk shell. I don't even have an example here, but it's very thin and long. It looks like a little tiny horn or a worm, a long worm or something. Well, they're real small in the Astoria Formation. they're very large in the Keezy, especially at this location. And there's a couple of other snails and clams you find in there, but really this is what we were looking for when we went. We used to have field trips annually to this location, but now the rocks are on a cliffside underneath about a 10-foot overhang that's extremely dangerous, and someday that's going to fall on somebody and it'll kill them, and they'll be washed into the creek, never to be seen again, or until they become a fossil. So yeah, we don't go there anymore. It's extremely dangerous to collect there. But if you happen to see these, you know that they went there sometime in the past. That is Bathybombix. In the similar area, that would be, so the Cowlitz Formation, a lot of times when we're breaking the concretions, we find these, they're little tiny clams, real small ones. You only find these in the Cowlitz. So if you're breaking concretions, if you somehow get a bunch of concretions from the Vernonia area, sometimes they're in estate sales, somebody was collecting them, and you break them. This is upstream from the airport. We had an area called the Cannonball area. The concretions up there are typically Cowlitz, and you know you're in the Cowlitz because it has this little tiny clam. You will not find this in the other formations in the concretions like that. So that's another thing.
I've got one
with little clams like this one.
Yeah, I don't know if it's exactly like that, but I got an Astoria formation one with little clams in it.
So it's probably not this species, and I don't remember the name of the species, but it'll be a different species. And I would like to see the one that you have and how it compares. That would be really cool to see. Other Keezy stuff, the Mist Bluff area, there's not a lot of clams and snails. You find people may show you this kind of stuff. You have to cross private property to get to the Mist Bluff unless you go up or down the river, which is extremely difficult and dangerous. But if you have permit, people have permission to the property, or they got in there in the old days, and you see things like this. This is the Keezy Formation, Mist Bluff. I don't even think I have a snail or a clam from the Keezy at Mist Bluff. They're typically the other invertebrates. There's besides the coral, you have the crinoids, and you have sea urchins and sea stars and things like that. And then I brought this for fun anyway. This was the little shrimp that I found, or mud shrimp, that was in the Keezy. But you can see this rock color material has a little bit of a tan color compared to the Astoria. And so you kind of know you're at the Mist when it's this really lightweight. I don't even, Robert, you can help me with that. What kind of, is that a shale as well? I don't know, Greg, you know this stuff too. How would you describe the difference between this matrix that's at Mist Bluff, where it's really lightweight and tan, compared to like the Rock Creek stuff that's more hard and fractured in, not in layers? This can fracture in layers pretty easily, and this does not at all. What's the difference between those?
Well, the Keezy is a very deep, was a very deep depositation, 600 feet or more. And I believe it's almost all very small, fine ash, volcanic ash.
Yep.
So it blew out to sea, sank down. Why the difference in the densities and things like that, I'm not exactly sure, but it's basically.
Well, the ash is composed of glass shards, and so you're contrasting glass shards versus clay particles, and I think that's the difference in the density of the rock.
So do you think there's more clay in this one and more ash in this one?
There's more ash in the lighter colored one.
Okay.
The Keezy.
Yeah, they're both Keezy. It's just this one's Mist Bluff and this one's Rock Creek.
Yeah.
but this one's got more clay mixed in. And they're clearly different elevations. And there's uplift that's going on in addition to different elevations from when it was formed, because it's pretty deep, but the Kesey is pretty thick. So anyway, sometimes you can't tell just from looking at the matrix, you can tell from the fossils. And I would argue that that's the case with the Kesey, that because there's so many different areas of the Kesey that the matrix looks very different. Whereas the Astoria, it's almost the same all the way through it. So just things to look at. Other ones for fun, sometimes you can find these little razor clams. This is Astoria razor clam. It's called Solon conradi. It's not a great specimen, but they're never bigger or wider than a fingernail. And they're about 2 inches long at the most. If you have a collection that has the same critter, but it's this long, this is Eugene formation. The Solon are extremely long in the Eugene formation. They can be small as well. Both of these are Eugene formation. This is the biggest they get in the Astoria. They get really big in the Eugene. So both of these are Eugene. So if you're just looking at one, you might not know, but if somebody has a collection and you have really large ones, you're in the Eugene formation rather than the Astoria formation. So that's another thing to look at that I found was interesting. Here's the Ascilla that Tammy was showing. We can see up close. This is found in all of them. So this one, you won't be able to tell which formation it is. You just know what it is. So the fun thing about this one is it has this, I think it's called bifurcation, but it's a chevron pattern. So it looks like a V. It starts off at a point down here, and some of them turn left and some of them turn right. So if you find that V, you know you have Acila, A-C-I-L-A. And that's in the Kesey, that's in the Astoria, that's in the Eugene, that's in the Empire, is everywhere, ubiquitous. But it's the only one that has those ridges. So it doesn't help you tell you where you are, but you know what it is. You know your tertiary and you know it's an Acila because it has that V pattern. You just have no idea where. So that's a fun one. And then, okay, so then I mentioned I'm kind of bouncing around, but the Eugene formation, this one goes all up and down the valley. The Eugene material is white like Astoria. It's in gray rock, it's white, there's lots of concretions, but it's white. The ones in the Salem area have really poor preservation. The shells are gone and all you get are casts. So typically Bruclaricia is a lot bigger than in the Astoria formation, but you don't have any shell material. It's all just the cast of the inside. They call it a Steinkern. That's the term for the internal cast created by the mold of the inside of the shell. The shell is just gone. That's a pretty nice one. Someone gave me that. I have not been that lucky to find one. This one came from that location I've mentioned in the past. That's the wine locality, Legacy Vineyards, that's north of Highway 22. So this is, well, we'll argue south of 22, South Salem, the River Road locality up the railroad tracks. This is in the northwest of the Salem Hills. It's the same formation. You can see the material, but they tend to not have as much of the red color. And that's the iron that's in the clay that's in the South Hills that's not in the North Hills or northwest of the North Hills. And here's a major key example. I got to zoom out now because this is a big one. I had you keep this one in my classroom. So here's the Solon, the razor clam. It's small in this location. There's big ones, but you can see there's no shell with all of these, but there's at least 6 or 7 species of clams in this one. Not many in the form of, it does not have a lot of snails, very few snails in this formation, but there's lots and lots of clams, and you almost cannot identify them because you don't have the outside of the shell. We don't know if they're spicula. This shape over here is called Yoldia. It's the only one that looks like a genie's lamp. without the thing sticking out of the top, the handle. It's sort of that sort of, I don't know, whatever you call that shape. So when I know that one, and I know Solon, but the other ones are a mystery because you just don't have the outside of the shell to tell you what it is. So you can only guess. And so for that reason, most people do not collect the Eugene material from the Salem area, because once you have one piece for what it looks like, there's really not much reason to collect it again. You can't really identify it. If you head south to Eugene and can find a location, then it's a much more collectible, just because you can see the outside shell. Unfortunately, the best places to collect the material down in Springfield are now covered by the highway off-ramp that was added about 30 years ago. They covered up the best location. That's where this came from. So there's collections that will come out of the Eugene area that are just loaded with fossils, and you know it's the Eugene Formation, not because it's in Eugene, but because of certain ones that are found in it. And nobody collects there anymore because it's under the highway. So there's that. All right, I don't know how many people are asleep. I'm almost done with what I have. I want to share a little bit about, well, I know Robert's awake, so I want to mention Turritella. That's a super common fossil to find other places. This is the best you're going to do in the Astoria Formation, as far as I know. They're really small. They tend to be, and I don't know, maybe this is the clam you're thinking of. This is called nucleolana. It's not nucleus. It's nucleolana, nucleana. That's what I'm calling. Lots of little tiny clams. There's part of a dentalium right there. Actually, most of these are dentalium parts. Anyway, these are little, they're Turritella. That's a spiral snail. I've never found one bigger than that, and they tend to be in these little conglomerate pieces or in small piles of other shells. The nucleana snail, clam that I've seen in those. If you find a bigger one, you're in a different time frame. So, and I don't know what happened to them in the Miocene, why there wouldn't be larger ones. I don't know if that's the phenomenon goes elsewhere, but this is a Turritella. This one here is from the Colito, which is down near east of Coos Bay, Catching Slough. Our group went there and we collected these. It was almost entirely Turritella. So this is the typical size. I'm used to Turritella. If you go down in the California area, you can find Turritella in the fossil formations all over down there. But the ones in the Astoria are super tiny. And that's kind of odd. The ones in the Kesey, if you can find them, I know you can find those at the Sunset location by that big quarry that's there that you're not allowed to collect in. They have big ones, and that's Eocene. So the Eocene rocks have the big ones. The Miocene have the little ones. Just thought that was kind of interesting because Turritella tends to be, that's the same or similar material to the ones that you find from Wyoming that are often at shows and they're cut and polished. That's actually Goniobasis or something. Yeah, something like that. It's a different genus, but it's in the same family of Turritella. Couple left. This is the one similar to the one that Kent just shared, Musashi indorata. It's a different genus. I'm not sure why they changed the genus name. The one out of the Empire Formation, I didn't bring one of those down in the Coos Bay area. They're more prevalent down there. Kent seemed to find a bunch in the Astoria Formation, but they are pretty rare. They're hard to find. But if you look close, you might find big ones and you might find little ones. So there are babies out there, and that's always kind of fun to find the variety. It sounds like Kent may have a full array of them from small to large. The first 15 years of collecting, that's the best I could do. It was just a cast of the inside and some staining from where ribs used to be. So that was the best I could do for the first 15 years of collecting fossils. And it wasn't until recently that I found some newer ones. So that's just for fun. It doesn't help you know if you're in the Astoria, because to me, it looks exactly the same as the ones from the the Empire. And then there's a few mysteries. This one was given to me. I do not know what it is. It might be a Trophocycon. They're not in Ellen Moore's books. So there's things out there that are not common, and they will definitely throw you off when you got to try to identify them. I'm pretty sure that that's what this one is, but there's been a few that have crossed my path that people have insisted they got them from the Astoria Formation, and I've never even seen them before. So
I think I've got one of the similar to that that's at the aquarium, I think. I can't even remember what I got there now, but
you might
one
have
similar
shown
to
me
that.
one, because I think I remember seeing it and thinking, I think that's this one, the Trophocycon. It's really rare. The Trophon is very common. It has spires that come out this far. This one's very short and it's stocky and stub kind of, so more stocky than the other one. And it has two layers of these ridges. The Trophon doesn't have these. This has 2 layers. So it's a different species than the one that's in the book. Let's see, I think the only, I do have one more. Then this will be the last one. I have more, but I don't need to share them all. If I can, oh yeah, here we go. One more for identifying things I think is kind of interesting for those of you who are into clams and snails. So there is a snail that's at the beach. Oftentimes it's one that's agatized. The one in my left hand here is Calicanthrus. The one in my right hand is Priscofusus. And they pretty much look the same. So if you have it worn down and that's all you see, if this is all you see right here, you're not going to really be able to identify it. But the fact that it has these lines in it, these ribs on the other side, that helps. This has ribs, but also have these nodes in it. But what's even more helpful is when you see this. When you find these in the beach and you see this brown material that's attached to it. This is actually a moss animal. It's a bryozoan that was living on top of the shell at the time. The bryozoan's a moss animal. So it's actually 2 species of animals. Membranophora is the name of the genus. And it was living on the outside the shell as it moved around on the ocean floor. It got fossilized with the snail itself. And so when you see this brown layer on the outside, you know it's the Calicanthrus, because for whatever reason, it never attached to a Priscofusus. You will never find a Priscofusus with that Membranophora. So even though this one doesn't have any details in the shell itself to be able to identify it, because it has a Membranophora attached to it, I know it's Calicanthrus. I can label it that way. And even if that's all you see, you know that's what it is. There's only 2 snails that the membrana would attach to. Calicanthrus is one, and the Trophon is the other one, which I didn't bring the example, but it's the one that's like this that I was telling you. If you look at it this way, it's got these big nodes coming out. You can find Trophons with the Membranophora. They don't look anything at all like Calicanthrus. And so it's strange that it was only on those 2. You don't find it on any of the clams, and you don't find it on any other snails. It's just those 2. So things that you can do to help either identify species or identify locations. I think that's all I wanted to show. This is another nice conglomerate of things. That's Astoria Formation. It's all snails. Usually you find the Anodera all compiled together like that. That one there is, I was hunting for snails early on in my fossil career, paleo career. And when I found this thing, I thought I hit the jackpot. I couldn't believe how many snails were on it. It was my favorite piece for I would say the first 6 or 7 years of collecting fossils. So anyway, I think that covers most of what I brought. There's a few other details, but I think I'll save the torture if it's been torturous for another time. I didn't mention this one. This is the Scotts Mills material. I thought it was interesting, and I have a theory that this is similar in color but different in age to the Eugene Formation. So if you compare this with this, it's pretty similar. It's not great preservation. So something was going on with the way that fossils were preserved closer to the shore than deeper out at sea. This stuff is probably more ash, similar to the Keys. This is actually right here. This is a brachiopod. So that's kind of fun. So it's more of this hashy kind of stuff. And you're looking for impressions and you're looking for casts. And it doesn't preserve the same as you do over at the coast with the actual specimens. So anyway, for what it's worth. Questions?
Aaron, I have a question. How
Sure.
do you go about cleaning like all the green stuff off when you find them in bays?
There's all sorts of different things you can do. Some of the stuff, if it's extremely fragile, you want to be really careful about cleaning it. Some of these, like when I was cleaning this one, this real small one, was trying to get some more of it off so I could expose it. There were rocks that were around the edge of it, or I would just use a dental pick. When you have material like this, you can see the rock. It's really soft. You want to glue, like for some of these, they're not scientifically important enough to use Vinac. I use a Elmer's glue and water mixed so that it's like 20% Elmer's glue or less and the rest water, and paint it on. And I'll paint everything all the way around just to keep it preserved so that I can work on it. And then I might just scratch it with a dental pick when it's this fragile. So you don't really want to get too crazy with it. You could also use the $20 engraver, Dremel engraver, and you can work some of these things like this out without spending a lot of money. It's not great. You don't want to work on the fossil. You just work on some of the rock around it to break it apart. And that's kind of an easy way to do it without spending a lot of money. If you want to get to where you're actually prepping material out, then from there you want to go to using the air scribe that, it's basically a pneumonic jackhammer attached to a hose attached to a air compressor. And then that little mini chisel thing will help work out. So if I wanted to expose some more of the shell here, the dental pick is not going to do anything. That's just way too hard. So I would use an air scribe unit to work on some of this. Another thing that some people do is to try and use vinegar on this. I wouldn't do it where there's shell material, but you could certainly apply vinegar to some of this rock material. Some of these you might be able to do that with. But typically, for the Astoria Formation material in particular, there's so much material that if it isn't in good shape and it's not rare, I wouldn't even keep it. Just get the ones that are already done and paint that up. I'd do a 20% Elmer's glue to water on this, and it's done. There isn't anything else to preserve it, and I wouldn't say there's anything else to do to clean it up. These oftentimes I will take a toothbrush and some water just to kind of clean some of it up if it's dirty, really light, but you'll lose some of the shell if you're not careful too. So if you're in a place like the Astoria, look for ones that are whole and just preserve those. If it's super rare like this one, then you may have some work to do. I had to do some gluing to get this one back together. It broke apart. Actually, this one may be Bill Sullivan's. I think this is Bill Sullivan's. He did the glue work on this one.
How about like for organic matter? So if you go down like Fossil Point, it's all the green
Yeah.
algae and stuff.
Uh, brush. I would use a soft toothbrush and just work on it. I've got a bunch of that stuff that has junk on the scallops, and just a light brush. You could use, and someone tell me if you don't recommend it, to get some of the algae off, you could just use a little bit of bleach and like Clorox bleach and use a soft brush and dip the brush in and just kind of brush it off. It'll kill that stuff. It leaves, I mean, sometimes you'll have that black junk where the algae is actually dead and on there, and you could lightly scratch that with either they have stronger toothbrushes that are denture brushes, and those can be helpful, but you want to be careful you're not brushing off some of the shell as well.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Bleach
say,
works.
go ahead, Greg.
Greg, go.
I was gonna say bleach works good, but don't soak it in the bleach. I
No,
did
no.
that and it soaked in and destroyed some fossils. So you can use it as a like Aaron said, as a brush or as a wipe. You can also put a pad on it and saturate the pad and do that for, you know, a slightly longer period of time, half an hour or so. But just don't soak it in bleach.
And don't put it in vinegar.
And
Yeah, I
don't
was
put it in
gonna-
vinegar. No.
I was gonna say, don't get vinegar anywhere near your shell fossils at all, because you'll end up getting it on the shell and it could just start eating it up.
I learned my lesson when someone gave me a really cool snail shell that was not a fossil, and there was a snail in it and it was dying. So I thought, well, I'll just put it in some vinegar and take care of the snail and it'll clean it all out. And I put it in, and I went back a day later and there was a wasn't floating, it was a dead body and a bunch of color. And it was the layer on the outside of the shell where the color was not made of the calcium carbonate, it was something else. And so it was a pile of color and no shell. The shell is completely gone. So like, no, and I didn't know any better because there was no such thing as the internet at the time. And I didn't know any better. So yeah, keep vinegar away, but bleach can kill the algae. Yeah, but I just brush it on and then rinse it off. Water's not going to hurt most of this stuff. You can just get water and a toothbrush, and like with this stuff, water and a toothbrush work great. It's going to clean some of that up and then just paint the whole thing with Elmer's glue. If you use the Vinac, I would dilute it way down. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a shiny look to it. And unless you like the shiny look, I don't prefer that at all. I'd rather have it look dull. More fun, more realistic. Other questions?
Aaron, I think from the Keezy, I've seen some plant material in concretions, leaves, and also parts of limbs, tree limbs. Something you didn't mention about plant material.
Take it away. I'm gonna look really quick to see if I can find. Yeah, I have. Cool. In addition to the mollusks, you have all of the crabs, you have the mammal bones and other vertebrates that might be out there, fish stuff. And so trying to add in that to identify things is more tools that you can use as you get familiar with it. Robert, as you guys just heard, brought up plants. Here's one. There's a laurel lacy as identified by Jeff Meyer. This is in a concretion from the Astoria. I found this at Moolock, cracked it open thinking, oh, I'm going to get a scallop. And no, it's not. It's a leaf in there. So yeah, all of the formations have plant material in them, and leaves float out to sea and end up at the bottom and are certainly prime prime conditions out there to create a concretion. And yeah, so you can find that there. If I saw this and somebody showed it to me, I wouldn't immediately assume it was Astoria because it's the ocean, but you just have to remember that leaves can float. So these are the tricks. That's like a talk for another time, is things that throw you off from what you'd expect to see. And plant leaves in marine sediments are a really good thing to throw you off. So you don't always want to assume that if it's leaf material, it's mountainous. It's not always terrestrial. You do know you're somewhere near the coast. It's not deep water. But yeah. And then I think this is the snail right here, or the clam. This is the one that I think you've seen, Kent, in the Astoria. This one's Nuculana. And this one you can find in lots and lots of layers. It's white a lot of times, and you'll see tons of them. It's a very different species than this. This is it's actually like a little mini mud scallop. These are mud scallops as opposed to actual clams. I think they're related. They're all bivalves, of course. I think it's a type of mud scallop that looks like a clam. I always call them clams, but we call it clam gulch because of these, but I don't think they're actually clams. Whereas
I brought my specimen in, so when you get done, you can switch it back eventually.
Yeah, we
before you leave.
want to be able to see that. So yeah, it's for some of you, you may end up seeing this a lot. If you're going down to the beach, you'll see them a lot. And over time, this is 20 years that I've been collecting the Astoria Formation and other things to compare it to. And I tend to practice it a lot, so I see things, and it's with anything. So everybody gets to become a specialist as they go through it if they want to be. Bruce gets to see there's so many crabs that he can tell stuff left and right what they are, and Kent can see the skulls that he knows things left and right. And Nick, he's not with us tonight, but he knows the fish really well. So when you have a specialty and you see something a lot, you start getting used to it and you learn the names, and it's kind of fun. But there's always something to throw you off that keeps you on your toes. And I'm always trying to learn this stuff and see if there's more that I can add to the story. Okay. Any other questions? There's a chat. I'll see what that is. It's probably old, like, stop talking. I can send some matrix. Yeah. Yes, Pamela. Any other questions? I can stop sharing the screen. Somebody, did I lose? Oh, there's one more. Okay, so I apparently didn't lose too many people with that. Kent, what do you have? Let's see it.
Okay, let's see if you can.
Yeah, Nucleana. That's
And you
it.
can see it. They stick up. There's several that are sticking up. It's really
Yeah.
kind of hard to
Yeah, that's fantastic.
see,
Yeah,
but they're all nice and shiny too. It's a pretty nice specimen.
that's really cool. Yeah, that's Nucleana is the name of the genus for that. And its species name is almost the same as Nucleana nucleana nucleanus, Nucleana nucleanus, something like that. It's not in Bill Orr's book. It's in Ellen Moore's, and it's typical in groupings. It's like coquina is the term when you have all the same kind of species all mixed together. So that's what you have there, and that's a different even genus than these critters that you have in Clam Gulch area up there in the Easy. So cool. That's an awesome specimen. I think I put Harold to sleep. He's out. Oh no, he's not.
No,
He's
yeah, we just like,
All right. Anybody else have questions?
a couple questions to show you I'm not asleep.
Okay, great.
I gather you focused in on invertebrates because you're able to collect those versus vertebrates here in Oregon.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you in the Astoria Formation along the Oregon coast and south and north in the other formations as well, if you find the marine material, the marine vertebrate material, if you find vertebrate material in the ocean wave zone, in your tidal zone, it's legal to collect. it's considered souvenir material and it's not associated with a particular layer. The material coming out of the wall is associated with the layer and is considered part of important information that the state of Oregon wants to somehow retain. With that being said, at the Oregon coast, because the material that's in the wave zone is typically so tumbled that you almost cannot identify what kind of species it is. So I have quite a few buckets of pieces of bone, but you can't really identify anything other than it's marine mammal or it's fish. And maybe you can go to whale versus pinniped. If you have some kind of shape, yeah, you can do that. But most people don't see it. Most people don't notice it. They notice the clams, they notice the snails, and unless it's a whole shape, most people do not see it. The exception are people like Kent and those and Debbie and Lisa and some of those folks who are down there on a regular basis, and you get the eye for it and you see it, but they look a lot like rocks. And I will throw in also that in the years that I was hunting regularly, I think Kent was beating me to them anyway. So that's why I don't have a lot of vertebrates. I'm just teasing. I focused on the mollusks because I had a book that I could use to identify them. And I actually got to meet Ellen Moore in person. I went to her house and I brought my collection out that I used her book with. That's not good English. I used her book to identify everything, and I wanted her help, and she said she'd help me confirm if I was right or wrong. And she's an amazing woman, and she was awesome, and they were super generous with their time. But she would get on me when I had some guess about something, and she was, "Why do you think that's that?" Quite tersely, oftentimes. It's, "Well, because of this." And she says, "Well, no, you can't say that unless you have all the evidence." I'm okay. And but I think she was challenging me so that I would be. She came from the perspective that if you don't know what it is, don't put a label on it. And there's other scientists who come from the position, oh, put a label on it until somebody tells you it's not that. You're more likely to get corrected if you do it wrong than you are if you don't do it at all. So I tend to go that route. So I was challenging whatever it was that I had, and she was challenging me back, and she was awesome for that. And it's never a criticism. But I will tell one last funny story, and I don't think I brought it, but there's a little tiny one, and that's one that Mackenzie brought up, Cryptonatica. And I had it labeled Kryptonica in mine, and she goes, "Kryptonica, there's no such thing." I said, "Well, yeah, I got it right out of your book." She said, "No, you have it wrong. It's not Kryptonica, it's Kryptonatica." And I said, "Well, let me show you." And I showed her the book, and in the book, it's Kryptonica. And she goes, "Oh my God, you found a spelling error." And so she was a little easier on me after that, because at least that one I did have right. I identified it right, but she had mistyped it in. And so we kind of had that going. And I'm sorry to say that she's no longer with us, nor is her husband, but they were the most generous paleontologists that I met pretty much in my first 15 years of doing anything fossil related. So I miss them. Anyway, I specialize in this because I had her influence and I had the books.
Your emphasis this evening has been on differentiating various formations, but it struck me that you alluded at a couple points in your presentation, right, that the examples reflected different ecological zones. And it would be interesting to take some of the same material and switch your focus so that we're now looking at a collection in terms of, and say, hey, yes, this was this particular ecological zone as opposed to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could certainly be doing that. And I have a material, and somebody else might also be even better at it than that. What I was trying to focus on was the idea that you can look for clues in fossils to tell you where you are and what they are.
Well, no, I understand
and when they are. So that was what I was shooting for. And the fact that you can actually take this material and look at ecological differences as well as morphological differences over time. You could, I mean, there's so many different things, and you need to have a lot of data and references that I'm sure that these professionals and these experts have done so much more research than I have. That would be awesome for somebody else to take that and run with it. That's a really good point. That's a couple of years from now, I'll do one. Other questions about identifying stuff and knowing what you're seeing, and or challenges on anything I might have could be improved. I don't know that I'll give this talk ever again, but
I want to say thank you. Normally, I could care less about invertebrates, particularly clams, but you made it interesting.
thanks, Greg. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Well
I'll
done,
second that.
Aaron.
It's a game to me. The way I did it from the beginning is trying to find different kinds, and then when I probably have as many fossils from estate sales and donations as I do from collecting. And most of the collections that I get given to me, donated or otherwise, are missing labels. And I've been one of those collectors that I can't help myself. I just have to collect it. I have to get it. Oh, there's a box of fossils, I'm buying that. And that doesn't come with any information. So the game to me is, can you figure it out? Can you solve the mystery of where they came from? And maybe this time I can't, but if I find something and it matches and it makes sense, I mean, just this is the best one to give an example. I had one of these that I saw at a sale, and it just said clam $1. And there's no information. And then I was given 3 boxes of these from somebody who collected the same location. And I've never seen it anywhere else. And in all the books, Weaver's book, Bill Orr's book, Ellen Moore's other, on all the other formations, that's the only one that has that. So now I can actually put a label with the original one that I found because I have additional stuff. So it's a game for me because it's a big, gigantic puzzle. And the clams and snails take on a life of their own, not because they tend to be beautiful specimens, although I'll argue, whoops, I can't find it fast enough. Where to go? Well, wherever it went, here it is. I'll argue that's worth collecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's kind of an exception to the general conception that snails and clams are boring. But if you think of them as a piece of the puzzle, then sometimes it can be kind of fun. But thank you guys for the feedback on that. And yeah, that's probably long enough talking. If anybody feels compelled to go the same route that I have and go crazy with clams and snails, let me know. I'm happy to help identify or go over clues again. And it's always good to jot down notes in the books and